The night the mountain swallowed its last light, Eli Mercer heard a knock on his door that didn't sound like a knock at all, more like a plea wrapped in frozen knuckles. Wind pushed against the cabin walls, the kind of wind that made trees bow like tired men, and Eli almost ignored it. Up here, people didn't come knocking unless they were lost, desperate, or dying. He reached for his lantern anyway, because he knew what it meant to be all three at once. When he opened the door, the cold rushed in like an uninvited memory. A woman stood there, thin as a shadow, wrapped in a coat that had once been blue but now carried the gray of too many winters. Her hair was tangled, her cheeks hollow, and her eyes, God, her eyes, held the kind of apology that came from existing too loudly in a world that wanted you quiet. She clutched a small sack to her chest as if it were the last proof she mattered. "I'm not worth much, sir," she said before he could speak, voice trembling but steady enough to show she'd practiced the words. "But I can cook." Eli didn't answer right away. He hadn't heard a human voice inside his cabin in nearly 3 years. Since the accident, since the mountain had taken more than it gave, silence had been his only companion. He studied her the way a man studies a wild animal, carefully, respectfully, afraid one wrong move would send her running back into the dark. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Mara," she said. "I won't stay long. Just one night. I'll clean. I'll cook. I won't touch anything that's yours." The lantern light flickered over her cracked hands, hands that knew work but had been denied rest. Eli stepped aside without another word. The door closed behind her, shutting out the wind, and with it, something else, loneliness, maybe, or the lie he'd told himself that he preferred it this way. Mara moved like someone afraid to leave footprints. She hovered near the door until Eli pointed to the stove. "You can warm up," he said. "There's soup from yesterday." She nodded, eyes filling, but she didn't cry. She just worked. That was what struck him most. Within minutes, she had the soup reheated, added a pinch of herbs from her sack, and stirred it with care, like it mattered. When she handed him a bowl, her hands shook. They ate in silence, but it wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence that listened. Over the next few days, one night became another. Mara never asked to stay, and Eli never asked her to leave. She cooked meals that made the cabin smell alive again, warm bread, stews that reminded him of a time when laughter had filled these walls. She cleaned without being told, patched a tear in his coat, and hummed softly while she worked, songs without words but full of feeling. Eli learned she'd lost her husband to a mine collapse down south. Learned the town had offered sympathy but not work, prayers but not protection. Learned that when rent ran out and grief weighed too heavy, the streets became her only shelter. She learned about the mountain accident that had taken Eli's wife and son, how he'd come up here to disappear without actually dying. They were two broken things leaning against each other, pretending it was temporary. The mountain tested them. One morning, a storm rolled in fast and cruel, trapping them inside for days. Food ran low. The firewood pile shrank. Eli grew quiet, pacing, the old fear creeping in, the fear of needing someone and losing them again. "I'll go," Mara said one night, reading the tension like a second language. "You don't owe me anything." Eli slammed a log into the stove harder than necessary. "I didn't say that. But you're thinking it," she replied gently. "Everyone does. I take up space." Something in him broke then, or maybe healed. "You think I don't?" he snapped, then softened. "This cabin was a tomb before you walked in." Mara looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, she didn't look away. "Then let me stay," she said. "Not as charity. As someone who belongs." The storm passed. So did the fear, slowly. Spring came hesitant and muddy. Mara planted herbs outside the cabin, coaxing life from stubborn soil. Eli repaired the roof, and she climbed up to help, laughing when he scolded her for it. The mountain watched them, silent witness to small miracles. Trouble arrived with a man named Rourke, a developer who wanted the land. He came with papers and promises, offering money Eli didn't want for a future he couldn't imagine. When Eli refused, Rourke's smile hardened. "You don't own the mountain," he said. "And people like her don't belong here." Mara heard. She always did. That night, she packed her sack. "I won't be the reason you lose this place," she said. Eli stood in the doorway, blocking her path. "You're not leaving. I've lived my whole life being the easy thing to give up," she whispered. "Don't make me stay where I'm not wanted." "I want you," he he said, the words terrifying and true. And if they want this land, they'll have to go through both of us. They fought. They won, not with fists, but with persistence. Eli found old deeds. Mara spoke to people in the nearby town, people who remembered kindness before convenience. When Rourke returned, it was with a lawyer who frowned and shook his head. The mountain stayed theirs. Summer bloomed. The cabin filled with light. Mara laughed more. Eli slept better. They didn't name what they were, didn't rush it. Love grew the way it's meant to, quietly, deeply, without needing permission. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks, Mara served dinner and sat across from Eli, hands steady now. You know, she said softly, I said I wasn't worth much. Eli reached across the table, taking her hand. You were wrong. She smiled, and in that smile was every meal cooked, every floor scrubbed, every night survived. Not as a favor, not as a debt, but as proof that worth isn't measured by what you arrive with, but by what you build when someone finally opens the door. The mountain didn't feel so lonely anymore. And neither did they.